When you hear the word Japan, what comes to mind first? Pac-Man and Super Mario, Toyota and Nissan? Or the world's third most powerful economy? Healthy population, incredible culture, advanced technologies, and world-famous companies. This is all true, but there is another side to Japan. People die from fatigue at work. The nation is aging rapidly. The country is among the leaders in the number of suicides, and almost 15% of the total population is isolated from society. This is something that will never be written about in any travel guide. In the next 10 minutes, we will tell you why, instead of an economic miracle, Japan has been in economic stagnation for almost 30 years, what the lost generation is, who the hikikomori are, and what catastrophe Japan faces because of its long life expectancy. So, are you ready to go on a journey to the dark side with our guide? Let's go! Look at the top 10 companies in the world today. 8 of them are American, and for comparison, the top 10 companies in the late 80s, 8 of them were Japanese. What the hell happened in those 40 years? In the late 80s, the Japanese economy was at its peak. According to forecasts, in another 10 years, it will catch up and overtake the US economy. Because of this, it will become the best in the world. Japanese goods of high quality and low cost are capturing one market after another. Companies are growing rapidly. The Japanese rich are buying up art and luxury goods all over the world. Popular stars star in advertisements for Japanese goods. And the Japanese company Sony is buying the world-famous American company Columbia Pictures for $34 billion. Impressive, isn't it? But how did they do it? Japan's path at that time is very similar to that of modern China. In the 60s, Japan bought up patents for goods that were in demand all over the world. The inscription, "Made in Japan," means that it is a cheap and mostly low-quality product. But the Japanese are beginning to actively invest in research and development. And in the 70s, they became leaders in the number of scientific and technological patents. Quality goods began to take over the markets. The essence of the economic miracle also lies in the incredible mutual trust between the state and giant corporate cartels. These cartels are called keiretsu and are actually unions of the largest corporations that support each other. The Japanese government does not allow foreign companies to enter the market, and the Bank of Japan provides cheap loans to support businesses. The stock market is growing rapidly. The term SHUSHIN KOYO, lifetime employment, is emerging in the Japanese labor market. Everything seems great. It can't get any better. The beginning of the 90s, Japan has the world's second largest economy. The value of companies and real estate prices are growing rapidly. For example, in 1989, in the Ginza district, the price per square meter was equal to $1 million. The country is experiencing an economic boom, and everyone understands that the more you invest, the more you get. But what went wrong? The bubble burst. In the early 90s, the stock market crashed. It fell by 43%. One of the reasons for this collapse was the so-called Plaza Accords signed in 1985 between Japan, the United States, Germany, Italy, France, and the United Kingdom. It happened in the Plaza Hotel. Yes, that's right. It was there that Home Alone 2 would be filmed in a few years. These agreements were supposed to equalize exchange rates so that everyone could trade conveniently. But it had a very negative impact on the Japanese yen. The stock market is falling, and so are the real estate prices. Ordinary people have less money, and no one is willing to invest anymore. At the same time, thousands of zombie companies with large debts appear, living only on money borrowed from the government. These are almost every third company in Japan. They are dragging the economy down. Due to the economic crisis and the system of lifetime employment, large companies are no longer hiring new employees. A lost generation is emerging in the country. That is, some people could no longer earn a lot of money and were effectively isolated from society. An entire generation, millions of people, were left behind and spent the rest of their lives in low-paying and temporary jobs. This generation spans 30 years and accounts for 15% of the total population of Japan, which is almost 17 million people. Are you still with us? Then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. There's a lot of interesting stuff coming up. Meanwhile, we turn to the next page of our guide. The sad fate of the lost generation had a negative impact on Japanese society. In particular, it has created a large number of social problems. For example, only Japan has the concept of KAROSHI, death due to overwork. Although this term appeared in the 80s, it peaked during the period of economic stagnation. KAROSHI was the cause of the death of Japanese Prime Minister Keizo Obuchi in 2000, who had only 3 days off in 20 months in office and worked at least 12 hours a day. Many companies had to pay large monetary compensation to the relatives of the deceased due to KAROSHI. This is what forced company executives to kick employees out of their offices at the end of the day. However, no one canceled the scope of work, and now the Japanese work from home. Many people are not only physically but also emotionally unable to withstand such a workload. This has led to Japan being a country with a very high suicide rate among developed countries. Fatigue, stress, and sometimes job loss are the reasons for suicide. Japan is the only G7 country where suicide is the leading cause of death among young people. Another problem for the Japanese that is becoming more and more relevant every year is the so-called hikikomori phenomenon. Hikikomori are Japanese men who have voluntarily isolated themselves from society. They never leave the house and have no social contacts at all. They are completely financially dependent on their parents. The first hikikomori were members of the original lost generation, and today they are in their 30s and 40s. But over time, they were joined by representatives of the younger generation. Although they had a chance to enter the labor market, they found it too stressful and competitive. Today, there are almost 1 million of them. The problem of isolation and loneliness is very highlighted in comparison to other countries. In particular, there is a phenomenon called zahatsu, which means disappearing from others. Today in Japan, almost 100,000 people disappear in this way every year. We don't know how many of them return to normal life afterwards, but there are even entire companies that are engaged in making you disappear. Are you tired? Let's take a break and play a game. What do you think the average life expectancy in Japan is? 70 years? 75 years? 80 years? 85 years? The correct answer is 85 years. By this indicator, Japan ranks second in the world. Coordinated improvements in healthcare combined with the national diet made retirement the beginning of a new life for the Japanese. It seemed like a good thing, but there is always a catch. The share of the population over 65 has grown from 7 to 28% in just 3 decades. This means that one pensioner is supported by only 3 working people. On the other hand, the rapid aging of the entire nation is accompanied by a sharp decline in the birth rate. In 2023 alone, these figures fell by 5% compared to the previous year and set a new anti-record. If nothing changes, by 2050, according to forecasts, there will be almost as many people over 65 as people aged 15 to 64. And this can lead to catastrophic consequences. First, to support this number of pensioners, we need to increase contributions to the pension fund. To make such contributions, we need to increase the salaries of our employees by almost 2 times. And this will affect the final price of products. Secondly, an increase in the number of pensioners will lead to an increase in taxes. This, in turn, will reduce the amount of investment in Japan. Thirdly, due to the decline in the birth rate, there will be an increase in labor shortages, and leading companies will begin to move their production to other countries. Will Japan be able to overcome all these problems? We'll see. At least right now, the government and leading companies are doing everything possible to avoid this. As we have already said, Japan's path during the economic miracle is very similar to that of modern China. But is there a dark side to China? And what awaits it in the near future? Watch our next video.